Joining us now is Dan Doyle. He is someone who has decades of experience in the oil industry, has started a couple of companies himself, and he has written some op-ed pieces about what may be happening in Venezuela, what may not be happening in Venezuela. But I thought it'd be very interesting to get a perspective from that. And of course, he knows some petroleum engineers in Venezuela as well. He wrote a joint op-ed piece with a petroleum engineer from Venezuela about what is needed down there. But I think it's also interesting to take a look, step back and take a look at the oil industry itself. And I think that he's got a very interesting personal story as well. He wrote a book of Roughnecks and, help me here, Dan, of Roughnecks and Riches. Yeah, that's the other part we want to make sure we get. It's the riches that are there.
Yeah, well, we hope, right?
Yeah, so that's his book of Roughnecks and Riches, and his name is Dan Doyle. Thank you for joining us, Dan.
Thanks, David. Sure appreciate it.
Tell me a little bit about how somebody who has, saw a little bit about your biography. You're a film school graduate. How did you get into the oil industry? That sounds like a story.
Well, I started in the oil industry. Then I started out, went to study geology undergraduate and down at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. And I was down in Texas drilling wells. So a group of guys from the steel business said, "Hey, here's a young kid. He'll get us started in the oil business." So I went down, and I was acting more as a operator than a geologist. But we were drilling outside of Abilene, and it was going well. But then we went into the cyclical decline in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So I'm dating myself, but it was in the 80s.
Well, I remember that time well. Yeah.
Oh, terrible. And we didn't, it was such a, if you go back into the 70s, a little bit like now, it was a big oil shock. I think there were a couple of them. And everybody got into business. Everybody. The rig count was, in the 79, 80 era, rig count was 5,000. It was all verticals then, so you need a lot of rigs. But everybody was getting into it, all sorts of investor programs. It's funny when you're looking over an area, especially out west now, you see all these wells that were drilled back during this time. And it was just sort of a boom. And when the boom came off is about when I was getting started. And gradually oil price, a good price then was 25, but it was trickling down and down and down. And finally it was a bust. And I waited around Texas for a year or so. A young guy, are we going to go or not go? What should we do? Finally, there was nothing left. I moved back home to the Pittsburgh area, and a friend of mine, kind-hearted friend of mine, started giving me work producing his commercials, whatever, something to do, And so I'm doing that, and I'm thinking, oh man, I could do this for a living if oil never comes back. And so I ended up at NYU's New York University's graduate film school, and I kicked around in the movie business for a while. Had some success. I was at Sundance, that kind of thing. Had an agent and all that, but it wasn't for me. I just the sleeping on floor things, and ideologically, I probably was a misfit.
Oh yeah,
and. And so, met some great people though. And eventually I started I thought, okay, enough. So I scrapped together with little money I had and didn't have and started a rental company up. And I started buying equipment and renting it out to movies and commercials and a little bit of construction work, and got into cameras and generators. We got pretty big, and I used that to leverage my way then to get finally back in the oil business.
Wow.
And that was to start a frac company. And it just absolutely went off the rails. It was just the worst time because, just the same way that, the 79, 80 boom pushed a bust that I got caught up in. Now I got caught up. I started this in 2008, the frac company. And I got caught up in the global financial, recession, and where the banks were failing and Too Big to Fail, great book, the Andrew Ross Sorkin, and got caught up in that. And it was just a son of a bitch, excuse me, but trying to get this thing going.
I bet.
And just craziness. Guy pulls a knife on me in a trailer, and he's my builder. So I just gave just crazy. And then these crazy partners, and I'd written scripts to make a little bit of money, and I started thinking, my God, I think I'm living a movie. And so I started taking notes, and eventually got around to writing the book. And so that came out a couple months ago, but it's called Roughnecks and Riches, a startup in the Great American Fracking Boom.
Well, and of course, one of your reviewers said it was a rollicking ride, and that was a Wall Street Journal review that you had. I imagine just from that little bit of a taste that we had there, I imagine it is a rollicking ride to find out how you got into that. If you started a couple of companies and you did it successfly, I'm sure that you wouldn't have fit in with the film crowd that's there. No. It was a different kind of culture, I think, completely.
I get a kick out of, and I like a lot of these guys, but I get a kick out of, the awards. There's always somebody patting someone on the back, or always an award. It's always about their bravery. But, in the film business, you're in such an echo chamber. It's like you're just agreeing with everybody. These films that, get these kind of accolades, or these directors or writers or producers. And truthfully, the real courage would be a conservative trying to make a movie in Hollywood. There's not a chance. As soon as you go there, I'm a big fan of James Woods. I loved his movies. And,
it'd be like Oil and Water, wouldn't it?
yeah. But there's a guy that just shot himself in the head when he came out with his own opinions, because they just won't have him, and he knew it. Yeah. He knew it. But, and he was a great actor.
Well, when I look at the Oscars and things like that, what it reminds me of are these cliques that you used to see in high school, when they'd vote for people for prom queen and that type of thing. It is a popularity contest, and it seems like you succeed in that if you're going to try to appease everybody's feelings and flatter them and that type of thing. So, if you're about something that's serious and literal, that would be a difficult ride to hoe. I remember the 80s, and, interestingly enough, Dan, my wife and I, we went to, our first job was with Texas Instruments in Houston. And so we got there as everything was blowing up in 1980, and it was a boom town. And then we got kind of tired of it. We wanted to move back home, and then we couldn't sell our home. I mean, it was just, everything was in free fall. It was collapsing. It was amazing what happened to it, the boom and the bust cycles that happened with that. But of course, we've seen that a lot with the oil industry itself. I mean, when you look at the boom with the OPEC embargo and everything, you saw oil go up. And I've talked about this a lot on my show in terms of what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz right now, with just that partial oil embargo. It was only against OPEC's oil to the United States. We saw the price of oil quadruple. And so, it's we look at it, and if something like that is going to happen now, of course, there's a lot of other variables here, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was Venezuela and what's going to happen there. One of the things that just happened this week, Trump started floating the idea of making Venezuela the 51st state, and I guess Canada was
52nd. Don't forget to get Canada.
Yeah, that's right. I guess he forgot about Canada in the meantime. Yeah. So. Sure. And where does Greenland fit in? Are they number 53?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe Trump's going to get in the flag business. Yeah.
Trump land. I get it though. I kind of actually, I'm just, I write these pieces, and I'm just about to give one to the publicist. I'll send it out today. And I don't know where it lands. They shop it around, but what it's about is, he is, love him or hate him, wherever you stand, he is sort of in the beginnings of remaking the global oil industry, and really where we buy our oil and gas. We consume 20 million barrels a day of crude. And I know we like to say, we consume everything we have, but that's counting. It's kind of you're taking BTU equivalencies from natural gas production, and that's not, it kind of is true, but truthfully, we need 20 million barrels of crude. And if you look, I don't know if it was by plan or what, but Trump comes in, he's talking drill, baby, drill. And that was the campaign rhetoric. Really, we were going into kind of a rig count free fall, not free fall, but it was really coming down because oil prices were really bad. So we were in a bust in February. And by about the 5th of March, we're in a boom because of Iran. And the beginnings will probably be a boom. And so but the administration's done a lot to help U.S. producers, and we're taking advantage of some of that stuff to do with BLM spacings and surface facilities and all that. And it's really helpful. So he's kind of changing the bias from what it was in the Biden administration to oil on instead of oil off through the federal. So you have that, and then you have Venezuela. And Venezuela, at best, was 3 million barrels a day back when Nixon was president. And it's down to about 1 million barrels a day. And it's kind of funny because I was visiting a friend at Colorado School of Mines, a professor, and I'm looking around for him. And I walk into an office, and it's another professor, and we just start talking. He's from Venezuela, and his wife worked on Lake Maracaibo for the Chinese. And we start talking, and I get a call from the publicist for the book, and she says, "Hey, I need a story on Venezuela." I go, "What do I know about Venezuela?" She goes, "Can you find someone?" And I'm sitting with this guy, Louis Zerpa, who's a PhD, professor, and I'm like, "Louis, are you from Venezuela?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Hey, you want to write an article?" He goes, "Yeah, sure, man. Let's write an article." So he provided the insight from, hands-on in Venezuela and talked about the Rinco, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, the super heavy oils. But what's going to happen down there is Chris Wright is doing a great job. I really think highly of Chris Wright. Anybody in the oil business thinks highly of Chris Wright, the U.S. Energy Secretary. He started a couple companies, but the big one was Liberty, and it's a frac company, but it's a little more than that. And it's a bunch of really smart guys like himself, an MIT engineer, that put this together. And anyways, Wright is down in, is I don't mean physically, but he's pushing. The first thing to do is we get the diluents that are needed that were kind of embargoed out of or sanctioned out of the picture, and those diluents immediately boosted that production by a couple hundred barrels a day. And now I'm hearing that Exxon, if you remember Darren Wood's comment, it's uninvestable when all the majors, the CEOs of the majors got together at the White House.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
He kind of broke ranks and said, "Hey, it's uninvestable." Now I'm hearing Exxon's poking around down there. So I think that they're going to end up pushing it, and if it doesn't go to hell, who knows politically what happens down there. But if we can keep it together, maybe that oil starts going to us instead of the Chinese. The Mexican market is off a little bit. They're mining crudes, which are essential to our Gulf Coast refineries that require the heavier crudes than the light stuff we're pulling out of shales. There's a difference in gravity as a way to measure it, but very light, low sulfur crudes. But the refineries need some of that heavier stuff that comes out of Alberta or out of, Venezuela or out of, hopefully you can hear me. There's someone mowing the lawn outside.
Oh yeah, sounds fine.
But we, so anyways, collectively, you round up all this North and South American production and we're about 18 million barrels. And then you start adding in some other stuff. Maybe Trump's doing something here. And to his point, let everyone else fix the Hormuz Strait, the Europeans and Japan and China that are using it, because ultimately what we end up with is regionalism in the oil market rather than globalism. And so instead of us buying, crudes from overseas, we just keep it, regionally. We keep it here. Canada, we import about 4 million barrels a day. Alaska, Trump is opening Alaska up. Hillcorp is a big part of Alaska. Jeff Hildebrand, kind of another self-made, guy like Harold Hamm, and very big. He now owns the Alaska pipeline. This company, and so with all this going on, it takes a long time to build production, but we're sort of really truly knocking at that energy independence, moniker. That kind of getting there. I mean, that's a really simple way to address a really complex problem because oil flows everywhere. It's a real network coming and going, and refinery capacity, everything else. But in the simplest of terms, numbers, we're getting with our production, Canadian production, and South American production, we're pretty close. Friendly nation production, let's call it. We're pretty close to what we need to be self-sufficient.
Well, let me ask you about that, because when we get people like Biden in, and these people who want to just keep it in the ground, they say, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
they are hell bent on, no matter what it costs, they want to shut down the production of oil. And so there's a political component to this. Even if we get this all of this stuff running, they may wind up shutting it down at a later point in time. And that kind of brings us back to Venezuela. How much of the problems that we see in Venezuela, and they're sitting on a massive amount of oil compared to any other country, and yet they can't get it out of the ground. And it wasn't because they didn't want to, like it is with the American politicians, but it's a combination of politics, I'm sure, of socialism and confiscation and all the rest of the stuff that happened with that. How much of that was a technical issue that can now be solved? Other than the fact that to build up infrastructure, it takes a time. You can't just turn a switch and have this massive infrastructure in place.
Well, that's the problem. It's a big infrastructure build out, and that doesn't mean just surface. That means failed casing. That keeps the integrity of a well intact underground. So it means a number of different things. But I have found that the oil industry is really good at getting up and going, and I think it'll go along fairly quickly. I don't think it's going to solve all our problems. Venezuela, it's super heavy oil. It's very expensive to extract. That takes us to a separate issue. We'll get to oil prices, I'm sure, but it'll be quick, But again, it's not. That's the one belt. There are other crude. There is other crude reservoirs in basins in Venezuela, which are more kind of conventional and don't have that low 8-degree gravity stuff, which is basically, the majority of the oil coming out of Venezuela will not float on water. It's really heavy. And so it's got to be diluted and refined. It's expensive. So it will play largely into our mix, but you can't have $50 or $60 oil for that to work. You just can't. And so, just by way of example, we're drilling wells in the Powder River Basin with another company I started, another startup. But so we frack our wells back east, and then where we frack for higher back east, and we drill our own wells out in Wyoming's Powder River. And the well cost primarily driven by steel prices, because you run a lot of steel in horizontal wells, a lot of steel, miles of it. And it's going up about 65, 60, 70%, quite a bit. And we were at $50 oil. So if you put that in the basket, so you've got the well costs have gone up an enormous amount. And then you've had, a lot of inflation under the Biden administration. So you put that in the basket as that relates to pricing, to oil prices. And so you go back in time, and the $70 an oil a barrel, we're all over the place back in 15 and 16, 17. But we were $60 oil then was a lot better than $60 oil now. And then you have more expensive wells. So when Trump is pushing, oil in the 50s and 60s, we don't survive. You can pump a well. You can pump an existing well based on what your lease operating costs are, what it costs to lift and transport a barrel of oil. You can do that. But to go drill it, it makes no sense. That's why the rig count was falling all through 2025 and was looking. And when it hit 55, everybody that I'm talking to, and I'm talking to all the other operators, are saying, that's it. We're laying down. Harold Hamm up in the Bakken has never stopped drilling for 30 years. And finally, I think it was in January, said, that's it. We're laying rigs down. We can't make money here. So you can't have energy independence without a decent energy price. So I don't think anyone in my industry wants to see $100 oil because it's disruptive. Because $100 oil has always meant $50 oil. And $50 oil generally or always means $100 oil. That sine curve of boom bust. And so really, I'm not the only guy saying it, but we need something in the mid to high 70s, low 80s to continue going. And I'm sure Venezuela needs more. that because it's more expensive than shale. Shale's really cheap. That's why all the majors started buying up, Permian-based independents, because shale cycles fast and it's cheap. It's a lot cheaper and less time consuming than developing an offshore field. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's been a shift to it. But we can't survive at that. So when we say we're going to cut the energy prices in half and we're going to be energy independent, that's not true. You can't do it.
Well, it is truly amazing. And you see this boom and bust cycle, and it's always political. I mean, it's either an embargo or it is centralized control and central planning that is killing the thing, or it's a war that is causing it to go up or something like that. But it always goes back to political. And I guess that's the problem. It would be nice if they would just let markets operate, but they're not going to do that. We go back and we look at Venezuela. So tell us a little bit about the political history of the wells from your perspective happening down there.
I'm sorry, the political history?
Yeah, the political perspective. There was a lot of oil company assets that were seized by the Marxists down there and that type of thing. And what was left in terms of engineers and people who could actually produce something. Did that drive them all out and to go to other countries and that type? I know the oil companies themselves had their products seized, but what about the infrastructure of personnel that were there? Your friend who's a PhD in petroleum.
Yeah, I mean, there's no jobs. And so, it's the American influencer, and Schlumberger, great company, services company, which is a French company, but, it's basically headquartered in Houston, but not really, but basically. And Halliburton wasn't getting paid, and they got caught up in the nationalization. There's two of them, and maybe others, but two major ones in Venezuela. And, Exxon lost a fortune. Chevron stuck around because they agreed to abide by, what the socialists demanded. And, Total Energies, I think E&I might have, the Italian company might have. So they all got it. All the deals they had made to go down and spend money and extract oil were all nullified by, Chavez and his socialism. And what happened is you had a 3 million barrel a day country go to, sub 1 million barrels a day. And from what I've heard, it was mainly the military was in charge of running those fields. So so now you've got to get the service companies down there. And I hear they are. I hear they're looking again. But they're going to want to be backstopped by the U.S. government. They don't want to go and invest again and have, and have it taken away from them again. So it's there's going to have to be some work done, and it probably is being done as we speak. I'm just not aware of it. But it's important. It's important because how many of the, what do we owe? 38 trillion dollars? Is that what our
39?
39. Oh, okay,
I think we're going to be at 40 by the time we get to September, especially because he's got some new things he wants to buy.
or maybe by the time we get off this call,
Yeah, that's right.
How much is that directly related? I mean, there's a lot of it has to do with our social programs in the United States. I mean, that eats up quite a bit and creates a lot of debt. But and if they were more efficient, that would be wonderful. But a lot of it, how much of it is directly due to the Middle East? And I probably a lot. And if we could get away from it, I mean, we want to have friends over there, but if we could keep our markets close to home, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing, And I don't, the Iranians are not the Venezuelans. I don't see them stopping. I would love to see the Straits of Hormuz opened up today. I really would. I mean, the longer it stays closed, the better it is. But I also don't want to see the world go recessionary. And, I don't want anyone to die, any of that. But I just, I would like to see, stability over there. But I don't know that it's never seemed to be possible.
Oh, yeah. There's other issues,
And I start this article I'll put out, the best, the best way to solve the Middle East problem is to leave the Middle East problem. And, it doesn't stop.
I think the
So
scientists have some other ideas about that, though. They keep
yeah,
dragging us
yeah, I
back
know.
in. Well, when we talk
Yeah,
about political stability, what does that look like in Venezuela? I mean, you worked with Luis Zerpa,
yeah,
writing that op-ed piece. Did you guys talk about what is the? You said the military was running the fields
yeah.
there, and
And
what about the military and just in general the Venezuelan people? What is their attitude towards this? The
I think
American
the
companies.
Venezuelans, I think the Venezuelans love it. I think they had their fill of socialism, and they had
Mm.
and a dictator. And it's just crazy. We have Sean Penn going over and uh, talking up Chavez, and as a thug, and and the people suffer under him. Impoverishment.
Mhm.
Killing of the human spirit, which is socialism.
Mhm.
And anyways, it's I think the administration. I think we're putting our network is growing there, and I think it's going to stabilize it some. But I don't know. Who knows what comes of it. And Venezuela is good for 1 million plus a day, but the United States is good for 13 and a half a day, a little more. And my concern is what happens in 2028 when there's another presidential election. What
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
if Trump doesn't, or if Republicans don't prevail and keep the House, we're just going to go to standard playbook of impeachments,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's disruptive. They'll try to impeach him again, and all of that theater. It's just stupid.
Well,
So
and of
sick of
course,
looking at.
when you look at an oil-based economy and you look at how it has been used, I mean, they're coming after Volkswagen again. This time, it's coming out of Europe instead of out of America, hitting them with nearly $2 billion in fines because they're not getting their corporate average fuel economy up, or whatever the European equivalent is of that. So you've got these European countries, which I will put the Democrat Party in that same basket. It's almost
Yeah.
like a suicidal death watch in terms of energy. They want to shut that all down and prohibit it. And so there's that kind of political instability that's here at home, in addition to like Venezuela. But you're talking about the people are tired of living under socialism. I imagine that they are, and they would like to see some jobs and economic activity. But what about the military that was running the oil fields prior to that?
I, I don't know. I don't know what's being done. I would guess if Exxon and Chevron has always been there, but they're maybe increasing their presence. I'm just citing what I've read. So I would say that there's something in place that's going to allow Halliburton and Schlumberger and other big service companies to get in there,
Mm-hmm.
and for the military to cooperate. But we all know everybody. The only person gone from Venezuela is Maduro. Everyone else is in place, so it's kind of hard to say what happens. I think the longer we're there with peace, the greater the U.S. influences, at least in the energy business, and hopefully the greater production results from it. But what I was getting at before is back in the States when Biden was elected, the first thing he does is he immediately attacks fossil fuels. We couldn't lease federal lands, for a couple of years, or it
Mm-hmm.
might have been a little shorter than that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a mandatory Minerals Act from like 1914, whatever it is. Mandates. There's it's a law that every quarter there are BLM lease sales. Biden comes in and cancels it. And you couldn't lease lands, and then the people go in and they sue the federal government over grasslands or waterfowl or birds, predator, birds of prey, different things, and they hold it up even longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That works both ways, though. It's not always detrimental to us. Sometimes it allows us to hold leases longer. So, in a way, what they're doing is they go to harm the oil industry, but sometimes inadvertently they help it.
Mm.
And what would be better is to say, okay, let's look at New York. Okay, you guys want to kill off fossil fuels. In New York, the cost of electricity is about 40% higher than the national average. This is another article I wrote a bit ago. It was in Fox, I think. Yeah, it was in Fox. and and it's 40% higher than the national average. Natural gas prices are 23% higher. The childhood poverty rate in New York City is 26%. 26% of all children born in New York City, the 5 boroughs, are born into poverty. And in the meantime, they won't allow shale gas extraction from the Marcellus, which is a gift. All this natural gas, and it's clean burning, and this and that, and a friend of mine is a diesel fuel provider, and a lot of these data centers are being run off of power from the grid, but they're backstopping with diesel, and that just makes no sense to me. But that's always the case. I'm actually all of the above. I think if it makes sense, use it because we need it.
Yeah.
So I don't mind wind, I don't mind solar. It just we can't pay for it. It's got to stand on its own. And oil and gas get certain benefits for tax benefits. And I believe any industry, if one gets it, they all should get it. If one doesn't get it, none of us should get it. So it should be fair. But a lot more subsidies go into renewables, and they just don't really, all the money that's spent, they really haven't pushed oil and gas out of the way at all.
Yeah.
In fact, we're burning more coal right now, not by percent, but in terms of tonnage. We are burning more coal right now than we have ever burned. Yeah. And that's because we have to backstop this grid. And you need the power that comes from fossil fuels to do that. On demand, you just don't get that.
Yeah.
The other stuff.
Well, I've been pointing out for a long time, people that I worked with, that it's kind of like the difference. You've got a backstop, as you point out, the solar and the wind, with something that works all the time. It's always there.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like driving a car in stop and go traffic versus driving it at a steady speed on the interstate. You're going to use more fuel, and you're going to generate more exhaust and all that. So, yeah, it really is ideological, really, the opposition to this, whether it is a communist ideology or whether it is some kind of a green agenda ideology. It is political, and it's not practical in terms of looking at this. But it'll be interesting to see what happens and what comes out of all this. Let me ask you, we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz and what's going on with Iran. And, of course, part of the problem is not simply just oil. But now we've seen that there's secondary and tertiary things that are also produced there. Helium, for example, fertilizer, things like that. Right. Is that a factor coming out of the places like Venezuela? Is that always there whenever you're doing oil, or is that something that's unique to the Middle East? What is that?
I think it's unique to areas. I can't put myself I can't say much about it because I don't know much about it, but it is particular to certain areas. We don't see any helium where we work, and but it's some areas that there are some areas that link well to that. They do well. The fertilizers, I think that's a byproduct of refining, and that's I'm an upstream guy. That's a downstream issue, so I'm not really sure. But I know it's all getting affected. And what's really interesting, what I can speak to outside of oil and gas, traversing the Straits of Hormuz is natural gas. You've got a big LNG trade coming through there. Iranians, Qatari natural gas production is huge. And so what's interesting is natural gas prices are still sub $3 an MCF. That's nothing. It's like $2.80 this morning. That's and you know what? I think a lot of the reason why is shale extraction has kept natural gas prices so low. You bring on a Marcellus or Utica well in Pennsylvania nowadays, and you're talking billions of cubic feet of reserves that come with those wells. They're just enormous. And so we have a boom in oil right now, but I don't want to call it a bust in gas because gas has not been doing well for years. If you remember Aubrey McClendon from Chesapeake, used to do commercials with T. Boone Pickens it's crazy Wild West times of oil and gas production because Chesapeake was more gas. But gas prices were $10 an MCF pre inflation that we've seen in the last couple of years, and now it gets as low as a buck something. Right now at 280, people make it work at 280, but we produce a lot of natural gas in America, an enormous amount. and we should be using it because it's clean. But you have all this natural gas requires pipelines, not trucking, and so we have all these lawsuits stopping it. And it could be piped up to New York City if they would do their own drilling. The state would do really well. They could maybe create a fund for the poor or help the poor in some way. I don't think giving money away is ever a way to solve anything, but opportunities, and they won't do it because of the climate activists, and it's only harms poor people. It does nothing for the climate. They do nothing.
Absolutely.
Because I just want to add something. You want to talk about true toxicity. Start talking about battery production and acid rain and everything that comes with it. Smelting, horrible industrial practice, but necessary. But when you start talking renewables, you start talking battery production, and you talk about strip mining and everything else. And you drive past an oil well or a gas well, and there's cows a few feet away from it eating grass. You talk about a solar field producing the same amount of energy, and it's a death zone. It's a fenced-in death zone where the ambient heat is too high for birds, for really any living. You don't see life around solar fields. There's no life.
That's right. Yeah, and then of course the windmills do a job on anything
everything
that flies.
Right.
Especially
whales, everything.
The bats try to fly through that rapidly changing air pressure, and it blows them up just like a diver who's trying to come up too quickly from underwater. They just explode. Yeah. So it is. Everything's got a trade-off. That's the reality of this. And rather than trying to make things work with incremental improvements, because everything is so focused ideologically, they just come in and want to just do blanket bans or whatever. And it's not just ideological either. It's the people who are allied for financial reasons with one industry or the other, of course. And so all these things are in play. But let's get back to your book a little bit, because we didn't talk too much about what it's like to be out there in the oil field. I mean, you're taking a big risk whenever you're looking for something like mining or any kind of oil or anything like that. I mean, that's a very, very risky business. It takes a particular type of person, I think, to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a little, you feel like a pirate sometimes. Or maybe not. Sometimes a pirate, sometimes a gambler. But you try to risk off as much as you can, and there's a lot of really smart engineers, and financial people that have gotten together and found a way. But you never know. We're fracking a well right now in Wyoming. We had an issue, and it could have been really, really expensive, and really expensive with oil and gas wells is you're touching millions of dollars. Really expensive. It's not $10,000. It gets really out of hand quickly, and so there's always worries like that. I tell you though, it's for me. When I decided to do it, I was actually an English major in econ my freshman year of college, kicking around. Back then, you could go to college and not know what the hell you're going to do, and now you can't. And so I was.
Now you get a degree, and you don't know what the hell you're going to do after you get the degree.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, anyways, my dad wasn't a rich guy, just a hardworking guy with 7 kids, and a good friend of his who was a rich guy. They pooled their money, and they went and drilled a shallow Pennsylvania oil well, and they really wanted to do it. And I started coming home on weekends. I grew up in Erie, and I started coming home from Pittsburgh on weekends. And we'd all get in this, 7 kids, a couple dogs, and my dad and his partner, my mother, and we'd all go to the well. And we would, screw around the well, And I'm like, my God, this is like legal. And it's like treasure hunting. This is great. And so I switched off. I changed up to a geology major and stayed in school for the remaining 3 years straight to get caught up, and then came out. And this is kind of in the book, but I came out. We started doing shallow wells. I found some investors. I actually tried to do NASD. That was the first thing I did. Is I thought, well, I'm going to do these Reg D programs. So I set myself up as a broker-dealer, NASD, SEC registered broker-dealer, and went all over the country talking to, this old Dodge Duster, talking to people about investing in getting their clients to invest in it. And I found a guy out in Denver to drill, and he'd let me drill with her, and I said, it was a company called Bellwether Exploration, a great guy, George Aubrey, on 17th Street in Denver, which used to be the Western oil hub. Still a little bit is, but not so much anymore. And he goes, okay, I'll let you buy into these wells. And how much are you going to raise? And I'm like, I'm going to raise $2 million. And so I go away for 3 months, and I come back and I raise like $175,000. He's like, oh man, you're killing me. But he let me. He took the money anyways, and that's kind of the start. And then I started drilling shallow wells with some guys in the steel business who backed it. And they said, hey, go to Texas and let's go after some bigger reserves. And I kind of talked about that. I went down to Abilene and we were drilling, and then hit a horrible downturn. And did the movie thing, started a company up, renting equipment to movies and commercials and other industries. And then I used that and, started this company up, and found a couple operating partners, and went down to Oklahoma with some builders, and it was an absolute nightmare. It turns out we wanted a specialty blender, or my partners did, and it was we didn't realize it was a patent protected part. And what we did realize, though, it was a Schlumberger patent, and these guys were stealing the parts from Schlumberger. And so it's funny. There's a guy, the engineer, I had to call and ask for permission. I'm like, sir, I know the patent's expired. He goes, so what? And, this guy at Schlumberger. And I'm like, can we just do one? Because we're so far down this road. He goes, no, I don't see it. And it's funny. I just found him on he's in, where the hell is he now? He's overseas somewhere. But I gotta get the book to him. Anyway, after all these years, I found him. But then, one thing, one guy ripping us off, another guy ripping us off, and then my partners kind of went nuts, and it just, and it's really a story about, it's really just an entrepreneurial story. It's not about oil and gas as much as it is about starting a business. Mm-hmm. And it's really the through line. It is, if you're walking through hell, keep walking, and you'll get there. And, so that's kind of what it was. Yeah.
Well, whenever anybody becomes an entrepreneur, they start any kind of a business, there's always a lot of risk involved. And but I don't think there's probably any business that is riskier than that. I mean, that's it on steroids, entrepreneurship on steroids. You really are putting it all out there, aren't you?
Yeah, it really is. It's so capital intense. It's really tough.
Yeah, that's amazing. But of course, the payoff can be there, right? So that's the thing that draws people in. Big risk and big potential payoff if you make it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a great group of people. It's it's a brother and sisterhood. Everybody working together and solving issues, and it's just hardworking people. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy is we get so attacked from the hard left. Not everybody. I've got plenty of different that are realize we need it, but we go out there and you're on a job site, and there's white guys, there's Mexican kids, there's South American kids, there's American Indians, there's a large number of black workers are out there. The guy pumping water for us now, doing all our transfers, is a great guy, black guy, and a number of his crew, the same thing. And so it's this kind of melting pot. Mm-hmm. And nobody taught. It's just normal, and it's great. We're all working together, and all this stuff you hear about has no application. This social, this cultural stuff that one side of the spectrum wants you to believe is true. None of it's true. It's just a great group of people working together. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking a great picture would be all these guys. I mean, you'd have to ask the minorities to step out of the picture, but would be all these guys, and and have a picture and say, no white privilege here, because there is none. These guys just grew up working. That's all they've done is work. And it's sometimes it's tough. I mean, the other night I had to sleep in the Chicago airport because everything was getting canceled and every hotel was booked. I said, okay, I'll sleep in a chair, and that's kind of typical oil field. it's just the level of work and, wonderful people, and they've got family back home and they're taking care of them. It's sort of the American dream for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's really it's just great to be around them.
Well, and that's the thing, if we have freedom, then we have a chance to work hard. We have a chance to take risks. We have a chance to produce something. And that, I guess, is the thing that bothers me the most in terms of what I see here politically and ideologically, is they just want to shut everything down. It's like, keep it in the ground, don't do anything. So what are we supposed to do? Yeah. They don't want to build anything. They don't want to grow anything. No. They just want to stop everybody else from doing anything. That's the thing that really bothers me when I look at this.
Yeah, stop everybody and get everybody to fit into an ideological box.
Yeah.
And, I just to pick up on the white privilege thing, I was reading a book a friend of mine wrote, who's kind of a hard left guy, but a good guy, he's a good guy. And he went to Phillips Exeter Academy and never wanted to tell anybody per the book that he went. And then that is the direct pathway to Yale and Harvard and the Ivies and and Wall Street success and political success, and so maybe for that guy white privilege is I know we're talking about oil and gas, but sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
For that guy, maybe that's true. Maybe that guy feels that, but that's a fraction of the conversation. A fraction. What about everybody else? They aren't getting any of this. There's no direct path to Yale or Harvard. There's just work, and that's kind of who ends up in the oil business. And like I said, it's represented by all ages, by all races, by all genders, and we don't see as many women out there. Typically they're more managerial as engineers, but we've had women work as frac hands, and it's great. Everyone loves them. So they fit right in with everybody else. So it's that's what I love. About
just like you're talking about your friend, I think there is on the left. I think there's a lot of guilt that is there, and they project that on other people.
Yeah, they do.
And that's the way they assuage their own guilt, is by punishing other people who probably didn't have that same kind of advantage that they had. But they're going to make themselves feel better about that to try to compensate for what they were given.
Yeah, it's this sliver of people that are so privileged to have been able to afford a $100,000 grade school education, but that is not America. That's not right. America. That's not these guys. We have a Kentucky camp. A lot of our guys come out of Kentucky in the hills of Western Virginia, and these guys never got a break. They never. Nobody else gave these guys a break. They just did it on their own, and they go away from home for a long period of time. But they're just wonderful people. Just wonderful.
Well, it's No Country for Old Men, right?
Yeah.
I never saw that movie, but I know of it. But so I don't know if that reference is appropriate or not. But the book is of Roughnecks and Riches, and probably a great story, a rollicking ride, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, of entrepreneurship, really, and something that I think really behooves us to have a perspective that is balanced and practical when we're looking at drilling, when we're looking at mining. I've talked to miners in the last few weeks about various minerals and things like that. These can be very dirty businesses in terms of things that happen, but they are necessary, and there are ways to control that and to moderate that. And we have to be practical about this, and instead of absolutist, instead of being ideological. So it's a great story, and it'll be interesting to see what actually happens in Venezuela. And I would be all for, as I said to you before we started the interview, I said, I'm all for oil, but I'm just not for wars for oil. So it'd be nice to see if we could actually have some peace and prosperity, if we could have entrepreneurship, work, and manufacturing things, rather than all these political prohibitions and wars that are involved in all of this stuff going back and forth. But evidently, when there's enough money and power in something, the political class is going to be focused on that. And that's one of the reasons why they focus on the core energy businesses that are there. But thank you so much for joining us, Dan Doyle. And the book, again, is Of Roughnecks and Riches, and you can find that Amazon and I guess everywhere. Do you have a website that you sell it directly? Or
no, it's on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Simon & Schuster. You can any of the above. So
great.
That's the easiest way.
Great. It sounds like you've had a very, very interesting life, and I hope it keeps getting interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm ready for
I don't mean that as a Chinese curse either.
No.
Thank you very much, Dan Doyle. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.